Welcome to the Afterspin, opinions from thought leaders in our state. I want to ask John Hood and Chris Fitzsimon, one of the big stories in the western part of our state is the upcoming vote by nurses on whether or not to join National Nurses United Union. Now, many are saying that this could be a very close vote. Tell us why this unionization effort is being staged and what you think the efforts are. John?
North Carolina and South Carolina together are the least unionized places in the United States. Of course, people argue vociferously about whether this is good news or bad news, but the reason why the vote in Asheville, the nursing vote, is so important is because union groups hope that if they succeed in this election, that it will create a cascade effect. There'll be additional unionizations, at least in healthcare, if not in other sectors. That's why it's so important. I'm not a big fan of unions, so I'm hoping that cascade doesn't happen. But whatever you think about it, that's why the Asheville vote is getting so much attention.
Interesting. Although east of Winston-Salem and the area down east, it's not getting a lot of attention. Chris, your take on this?
Well, I do think that's getting a lot of attention because we're one of the least unionized states in America, which I think is unfortunate. And the reason I'm a supporter of unions, but putting aside whether or not unions themselves are good, when people vote for a union, it's because of a couple things. One is they want a single voice to talk to their management, the company, about their working conditions, about their hours, about their wages. And secondly, that there are issues there that they don't feel like they're being fairly treated, and they have a right, thank goodness, under our law and constitution to organize and speak with one voice. And it's up to the workers if it's a fair election, and which I hope it will be. There's a history in our state and other states of not having fair union elections. If there's a fair election, the workers can choose whether or not they want to be represented and have one voice speak to them about their working conditions and their livelihoods. That's all this is.
John, this really is part of a result of a mergering or buyout, if you will, of Mission Memorial Hospital and their network around the Asheville area. Do you think this effort would have been undertaken had that consolidation not taken place?
There have been attempts. There will be attempts. I don't think it would be at this high stakes. I don't think there will be as much energy behind it if there had not been that acquisition. That's right.
And Chris, I think the implication is that if this effort is successful, it might be expanded into not only other areas of healthcare, but also other workplaces. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, certainly the labor movement believes that the best way to protect workers' interests is for them to band together and speak with one voice and have more power than they do as individuals. Certainly, they're not going to stop their organizing efforts. But, I don't think you should overestimate this one vote. I don't think we're going to be the most unionized state in America if the nurses have a union in Asheville. I do think the nurses will be better off in this hospital in this era of mergers and layoffs and consolidations. And that's what I think this literally for the nurses involved. Not the union itself, but for the nurses involved, it's literally about their working conditions and their families. That's why this is so important. And then they have a voice and they have a vote. It's a democratic process.
I mean, the labor movement has struggled for decades. I mean, essentially, unionization has been falling in the private sector for a long time. It is minuscule, even in states that have significant unions. It's not the private sector where the unionization is happening. It's in the public sector. And so I think part of the argument here is that if this is successful, that it might lead to more successful unionizations in other large settings, public sectors or quasi-public sector
settings. Teachers, state employees.
Well, they have unions. They just claim they don't.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have negotiating power, and they don't have the right to strike.
They can't use the law to shove people around. But of course, they have unions.
Yeah. And
they're not protected. That's nice. They're not protected under the law. And one of the reasons that unions have been on the decline is the laws have been much more hostile in the last 20 years. For their right to organize. That's what the labor movement has been saying, and they're right.
One of the things that I found interesting as I was reading about this topic was that we typically associate Republicans as being anti-union. This article was going back and saying that, for instance, with Dwight Eisenhower and some of the other early Republican presidents, they were actually pro-union for a long period of time and have actually become anti-union since then. It was an interesting article. Well, thank you for watching the Afterspin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.